Hello, my name is Dan Barnard, here, local financial advisor in Scottsdale. 30 years in the business helping families save, invest properly, conservatively as a fiduciary. And now after 30 years, my clients are in their later years, and I'm finding out quite often that although they've accumulated a lot of wealth, now they have health issues. And a lot of it's been obviously caused by our diet or their diet. And Rick, it's been a pleasure to have become a dear friend of yours the past 3 years. You've certainly shown me the light of the effects of our diet in the form of breads and carbs and sugar. And so it kind of come full circle here after 30 years of thinking I was pretty healthy with all my athletics and sports, but eating really the wrong foods. And now it seems like I have really, thanks to you, I think I feel like I'm in the best shape I've ever been.
Well, you probably are. Played a lot of tennis and now pickleball. That adds to the drama of life, and it's good for you health-wise. But if you don't change your diet, then we have a lot of problems. And as you know, as I wrote in Sugar Crush, sugar is the culprit in all its forms. And we were just talking just a few minutes ago, like fruit is okay. No, it's not. All sugar is bad. It causes inflammation. And on the way down here to do this podcast, we were listening to Dolly Parton's with her new song, World on Fire. Right. Well, it's interesting because World on Fire is a political song that talks about the demise of this country because of politics, left and right, doesn't matter. We're all in this together. And the word fire comes from that's where inflammation comes from. It's the world on fire, your body on fire, and that's what we need to talk about. If you got all that wealth and you don't have your health, what good is it?
Absolutely, Rick. Couldn't agree with you more. And now that having been in the business managing money and recommending investments for clients for 30 years, and now they've accumulated all the wealth, and now they're going to doctors. They can't ski anymore, or they're or they're in the hospital trying to rely on the hospital's solution to solve their issue. Whether it's just think of any great hospital system like MD Anderson, and I've had two very dear clients that have had to go down there and follow their protocol to get healthy. And guess what? They're still not healthy.
No, they're not. Even this town, when I started here 50 years ago, Scottsdale Memorial Hospital was the main hospital in this town, Scottsdale, Arizona. It was called Scottsdale Memorial at Osborne. Now there are 6 hospitals in that chain. It's one of the biggest hospital chains in Arizona. Not because we're healthier, because we're sicker. Hospitals don't make you healthy or wealthy. They make you poor and sick because they take all your money, because they never told you that your diet was killing you. And that's what we talked about in Sugar Crush. And on my new book, Unglued, is getting to the cause, but also the solution. So that's what I'd like to talk about today is how do we get off of sugar? And if we can't or didn't, and we're now 70, 80 years of age, like Martha Stewart, by the way.
Martha Stewart, right?
New, just today, Sports Illustrated. She looks terrific, absolutely terrific. I'm sure there's a little touch up there, here and there, but she actually, I was amazed. She's 80 years of age.
Right.
So food is an extremely important part of the healthy scenario.
Without a doubt. Well, what was interesting was to listen to YouTube and Stanley Druckenmiller talk about the economic situation that we're in, banking. He was talking to a USC School of Business graduates and talking about, Social Security, entitlements, our generation, the older generation, the folks that are receiving the benefits, population. He went into a lot of topics, but he really exposed how really fragile our system is right now, and that we have a big problem, i.e. healthcare, and you have a solution,
right?
Rather simple.
Well, even the word healthcare, that's not healthcare. That's sick care. Healthcare is your diet. Going to a doctor like me, you're not coming to ask me what to eat, basically. I'm telling you what to eat, but you're basically coming to me to see if your legs should be cut off or can it be repaired. There are 1.5 million amputation worldwide every year.
What?
Every year.
1 million?
1.5 million.
Wow.
That's a staggering number. And that's just one disease. 800,000 gallbladder diseases in the United States. That's not caused by fat. That's caused by sugar. So disease after disease after disease, all caused by sugar. And I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback on that sentence, but tell me if I'm wrong. I love to have this debate. Dolly Parton is telling us the world is on fire because it's a political debate. The USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, has the food pyramid. What's on the bottom of the pyramid? 6 to 11 helpings of grain, bread, sugar. If you eat that every day, I guarantee you'll be a diabetic. So why would our own government, with our own money, tell us to eat the very thing that's causing the sickness? Could there be collusion with Big Pharma? Perhaps. I don't know. But I was in, I won't name the grocery store, a couple of weeks ago, and we were filming for my new book, Unglued, which hopefully will become a Netflix sequel and documentary. And I was watching this lady shop. And when she picked up something off the shelf, I came behind her. She didn't know I was there. I picked up her package. I read the label. Everything she picked up had sugar in it. Actually, I couldn't find anything in the store that didn't have any sugar. It was shocking even to me. But we followed her through the store, and where did she go? She went to the pharmacy in the back of the store with her prescriptions for the inflammatory diseases that she had from eating what she had put in her basket. Yeah. And no one's told her that. Now, Peter Marks, he's the head of the FDA. That stands for what? Food and Drug Administration. Interesting. So he hasn't controlled the sugar going into the food. He does control the medicines, and those medicines in the pharmacy, they don't work. That just allows you to eat more sugar. That's all it is. Yep. So if you have inflammation and you're taking this drug or that drug, they're all geared to make you feel better so you can eat more sugar. When the real answer is, and Unglued will expose this, is stem cells. Now, he also is surrounding that whole issue, and he is slow walking the cure because it does work. Not because it's not safe, not because it's not effective, but because it does work. So we're going to talk about that extensively in Unglued, which will come out this July, and here we are in May, so in 2 months.
Well, I can't tell you enough, or thank you enough, for the effects your book, Sugar Crush, had on my life. It's changed the lives of so many friends and clients of mine. I think the conversation comes up daily with friends, with friends who are my age, with parents who are dealing with itises and ailments, don't really know why, just following the same doctor protocol they've been following for decades and not getting better. And
They're not getting better. And that's why I think Druckenmiller, sounds like it pronounces his name Drunkenmiller. So that's a name everybody should latch on to, because he's an international gentleman who's amassed a fortune in the financial markets. And he came out with a stunning, everybody should look this up, because at USC, the Marshall College for Economics, he outlined an unbelievable scenario of this country if we continue to spend on our entitlements, meaning Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, starting in year 2025, this is 2023, 10 years, all the money that's collected in taxes will go to the senior citizens. Nothing left for kids, nothing left for military, nothing left for anything. Truly a world on fire.
Right. In his in the YouTube video that I listened to of that speech, he talks about 15 years. The economic taxes, receipts coming in will be spent on basically Medicare, Medicaid, and really no dollars left over. And I find that strikingly just crazy to even think about.
And we have this Congress and Senate and President, and they don't understand this?
Yeah.
I always say if these people don't understand that, they should be fired. And if they do understand it, they should be arrested.
Yeah.
Because this is not complicated.
Right.
Certainly, it's got a lot of pieces to the puzzle, but it's really simple. Our diet is causing the diseases. There's a document in 2003, Senate committee chaired by our good Arizona Senator McCain, long since passed away, by the way, by cancer, glioblastoma, which in my opinion is nothing more than sugar and inflammation of the brain that turns into cancer. That's how he died. However, ironically, he chaired a committee on non-embryonic stem cells, U.S. Senate year 2003, 62-page document. The comments from the senators about this miraculous, well, I just used the word they used. It's a miracle. What were they talking about?
Right.
Autism, muscular dystrophy, Jerry's kids. Wonder where that money went. Very solvable. Joanne Kurtzberg, an investigator from Duke University, gave these kids, I'll outline it, kids that couldn't talk, autism, gave them hematopoietic stem cells, just slightly different from the umbilical cord, a little technical, but nevertheless stem cells. And the same dose to kids who had muscular dystrophy, couldn't walk. She showed in gene arrays, and we get into the topic of epigenetics, these are not genetic diseases. The same dose, these kids who couldn't talk are talking. And she had it on film. And the same kids who couldn't walk were walking. I said, Dr. Kurtzberg, this is not a genetic disease. This is an epigenetic disease. And they're not different diseases because you gave them the same dose of the same thing, and you cured this, and you cured that, and all other 10 million itises are in the ICDA book that Medicare puts out for doctors so we can get paid to write for prescriptions that don't work. This is a national disgrace. Dolly Partons, thank you for your song. You would play it again. The world is on fire. Absolutely on fire. And thank you, Druckenmiller. It's not Druckenmiller, it's Druckenmiller, meaning to press, and he needs to press this message home. It is a beautifully articulated argument that we're in trouble.
Right. So let's touch on an article you shared with me about a month ago, written by Steve Forbes, talking about Alzheimer's and his frustration with our inability to come up with a solution. And we've reached out to his staff to let them know that, you have a theory and you're going to explain it extensively in your book, Unglued, and, to reach out to you and us and connect the dots there and have obviously a larger audience to get the word out. So why do you, he wrote the article and explain a little bit about that.
Well, he was frustrated that he thought it was scandalous, is the word he used. Now, remember, he ran for president years ago, and actually I had dinner with him years ago. So he has a very good voice out there in the financial world, and he had this concern that that disease was not solved. Well, let me just give some background on Alzheimer's. That was a doctor in the early 1900s who noticed that some of his patients had these inflammatory conditions of the brain. They were losing their memory. And he had 3 or 4 patients, early 1900s. Now it's the number 1 cause of death in the older age group. Well, wait a minute. It didn't exist before, and now it's an epidemic. COVID, epidemic, sugar, it's all related back to what we're eating. But in 1974, high fructose corn syrup was introduced into the human genome. And when that genome is affected by a foreign object, such as high fructose corn syrup, then it attacks the genome. And we all carry different genes. We call those alleles, A-L-L-E. So what does that mean? So that means like you have a couple alleles that if you ate sugar, you get this particular itis that Dr. Alzheimer's say, well, you have Alzheimer's disease. Not a disease, just inflammation of the brain, the hippocampus, and the olfactory nerve. Technical terms, that's what it is. I get a different itis because I carry different genes. And the reason that is so, because we have to have diversity, biological diversity, because if a meteorite hit tomorrow morning and the only thing to breathe next day was sulfuric acid, I guarantee there'd be some people on the planet say, what a wonderful day. I love sulfuric acid. So that's how the species survive, just like penicillin-resistant organisms, MRSA. It's all part of this genetic code. But we're not born with an inevitable code. Now, to that point, by the way, there was just today, again, this is a big day today, the new head of the NIH was just selected by the Biden committee. Took about 2 years to politically ferret out her credentials. Interestingly enough, she's an amazing oncologic surgeon, meaning she does surgery on cancer patients. And she has cancer herself, breast cancer. And she talks about the BRCA gene and all this sort of thing that she has. Never mentioned the word sugar at all, because they're looking for another drug or another surgical procedure. And if you have the disease, yeah, certainly you want to do that, but never mentioned prevention. Back to the frustration with Steve Forbes and Alzheimer's, just another inflammatory problem. And he was saying, it's scandalous that we had, I don't know how many drugs have been produced for Alzheimer's, about 20 or 30 costing billions of dollars, and it's not solving the problem. And that's why. It can't. We have to go to cause, and that's sugar. That's simple.
So let's get back to, we were having some coffee one morning a few weeks back at one of the local country clubs up here, and we saw the picture of Phil Mickelson. And he had just won the Masters and looked, physically fit. Not a guy known as an athlete, but a phenomenal golfer. And then you had, of course, you with your decades of experience in treating patients of all walks of life, from the top politicians to the top athletes here in town. You obviously had a comment about that picture and his recent events that related to his health issues that he had. Talk about that.
Yeah, we were up at Phil's Grill at the Grey Hook Country Club in North Scottsdale. And Phil had his green jacket on, and it's in the restaurant there. Now, when he won that, he was not the greatest athlete in the world, but he was the greatest golfer at that time. Now he's the greatest golfer, and I think for 52 years of age, the greatest golfer athlete presently playing. In his age group. And he came in second in this Masters, and he won the U.S. Open as well. So how did that happen? Well, just so happens I know Steve Loy, and Steve Loy is his manager. And I gave Steve a book maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I said, if Phil would get off of sugar, he could come back and win again. Well, he did. I don't know if you read my book, but I know Steve Loy has my book. So Phil, if you look it up, and everybody can look it up, he tells how he got off of sugar, but he never mentioned me. Now, I don't know why he didn't, but just as a sidebar to that story, he lost about 20 pounds. But it was interesting. He had psoriatic arthritis, and he was taking Humira. Humira is a $200 billion drug that counteracts the effects of sugar on the skin, as psoriasis. Well, if you stop sugar, the inflammation in the skin goes away, and you don't need that $200 billion drug. I get it. It's a good business, but we got to tell the truth. You eat sugar, you're going to get an itis. And it depends where it affects your body. And then we call it a disease, and you think that's unsolvable. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It is solvable.
Right. Well, you mentioned stem cells a lot. I think when the book came out recently, written by Tony Robbins, his thesis in the book had to do with stem cells, health. You read the book, we read the book, and you said it was okay, written book, connected some dots, but it seems to be in the current kind of zeitgeist of society talking about health and sugar and stem cells. And so, can you comment about the book?
Well, I like the book. And he does talk about stem cells because he personally apparently did stem cells. And I don't know if he did go to Panama to see Dr. Reardon's clinic, but I assume that he did, but I don't know that for a fact. He also talked about Dr. Sinclair's book, which is another excellent book that talks about genetics. And he also talked about a friend of mine who is a podiatrist, by the way, David Armstrong. And it's interesting because I remember the page that he commented about him. It was on page 74 if you want to read it. But Dr. Armstrong, who has just got the biggest award for diabetes, by the way, yesterday I read this. And he is a well-published doctor, but he does not understand what I'm talking about. I was trained by Dr. Dellon. Dr. Dellon is professor of neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins. He's the one that taught me 25 years ago that diabetic neuropathy is a compression neuropathy caused by sugar, and it's a chemical equation that causes the nerve to become swollen as the covering of the nerve gets contracted and as it goes through a tunnel like carpal tunnel. And this was back in the 80s. This is how slow medicine works. Now, Dr. Dellon's written 800 peer-reviewed articles, and I want to talk about peer-reviewed in a second. He also has written 75 chapters, 2 textbooks, and now he also has a new fiction book out as well. He's a prolific writer, a great friend of mine, professor of neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins. He taught me. I made the mistake, and I call it a mistake. I said, Dr. Dellon, I'm at the wound care center. I've done thousands of your procedures. We don't have any amputations because it works. But I can't get my colleagues to understand this. I think there's more to your theory. And I said that to him, and he said, well, why don't you figure it out? Not nicely, even though he's a great guy. And I took it seriously, and I said, well, maybe I don't read the right literature. So I looked outside the box, and I found an article in Circulation, which is the Journal for Cardiologists. It was written by Dr. John Cook, and that's with an E, C-O-O-K-E. He's a cardiologist by training. He's got a PhD in vascular biology, and he only studied one molecule, asymmetric dimethylarginine. Big word, but it caught my eye. I texted him, and he called me on the phone. He said, I love your idea. Come up to Stanford, where he was at the time. This is about 17 years ago. And I worked with him, and we looked at that molecule with my patients, and I came to that epiphany moment that, of course, carpal tunnel, diabetic neuropathy, ulnar tunnel, all these neuropathies caused by sugar have a biologic basis embedded in the vascular bed, and that molecule is the connector. He said, well, quit your practice, come up to Stanford, work with me full time. I said, well, my kids are like 10. I'll write a book, and that book is Sugar Crush. I told him, I said, it's going to take 15 years before we figure this out by real scientists. I'm not a scientist. I'm a clinician. And he called me a couple of years ago when I was on my way to Panama. So that kind of all ties together. And he's in Houston now at Methodist Baylor, and he's the head of stem cell research for the United States. Brilliant guy and a great guy, too. So I call him and I said, hey, Dr. Cook, what's up? I'm in Houston. We have a layover. We're going to Dr. Reardon's clinic in Panama. I'm taking a friend of mine who's an anesthesiologist, got this horrible neurologic disease. We want to see if that works for him. And he says, well, he was basically in a wheelchair, so I couldn't go to the laboratory to see Dr. Cook. But anyway, he said, you were right. That molecule, asymmetric dimethylarginine, is the first molecule that blocks the nitric oxide pathway. It's a big chemical deal. And I told him, I said, I was right on 2 points. I told you it would take 15 years. It did. So the point is, this is a real disease, a real biochemical pathway caused by sugar. We went to to Panama to Dr. Reardon's clinic, and there's hundreds of kids all over the place, all these diseases. He's treating them. They're getting better. But we can't do these things in the United States because of the FDA. To Steve Forbes' answer, I would say he's right. It's scandalous.
Yeah. Well, Rick, I can only imagine how, you've seen thousands, tens of thousands of patients. You've amputated miles and miles of human
a lot of debris out there, let's put it that way.
I can sense the frustration that you have having treated patients. Now you've connected the dots. Now you're trying to get the word out. And why isn't the word out? And just, yes, you got Tony Robbins, you have, your book and lots of other books. Stem cells are out. The word is out there. I didn't know stem cells from anything 3 years ago. Injection, 2 cc's in my left knee, bone on bone. We're playing pickleball and tennis every week.
We are.
I've had zero.
And your
pain.
serve yesterday was phenomenal. It really was.
So there's an emotional component to what you've done here, and you call it. You want to educate people. You really want to educate them, and then I've been able to do that with my wealthy clients who've amassed a lot of wealth, and now I'm helping them with their health. Well,
look at that patient we were talking to on the car phone on the way over here today.
Yeah.
One of your clients, who is obviously a diabetic, didn't think she was, but she had every inflammatory condition that they have, from carpal tunnel, the bad knees, this itis, that itis, and on 15 different drugs. Yeah. Well, and then here's a seminal question. If you're on these 15 different diseases, Dr. Marks, why do you still have the disease? Because you're really a customer. That's all you are. You're not a patient, because stem cells cure this. You say there's not enough research. Oh, that's an interesting question. Back to the peer-reviewed. So we have a bunch of doctors around a table. Let's go back in the 1500s. It's the Vatican, National Institute of Health, Science, Vatican, 1500s. This guy by the name of Bruno comes in and says, I got a new idea. Comes into the Vatican, nice marble table. Guys are wearing cool hats. They're drinking wine out of gold goblets. He said, what's your idea, Bruno? And he said, well, I think that the Earth is not the center of the universe. Oh, this is a problem. I think other stars and there's other galaxies. Oh, dear God, they put them down in this is a true story, 1508. Put them down in the cellar. I guess we'd call that torture chamber. Little slap therapy for about 3 years, came up. We said, what do you think now? And he expanded on his theory. They took him outside, tied him up, lit the fire, and burnt him to death. That's peer-reviewed. You have a different idea. Well, the same thing in National Institute of Health. Now, how are you going to get a new idea if you're talking to the Flat Earth Society? And their bread, no pun intended, is buttered by the institution that they're in. They're all ex-Big Pharma people or USDA. They're all the same people. You're not going to get a new idea. The public has to have an outrage over this, and those people we just talked about. Get that song, Dolly Parton. Yeah. All these people, everybody knows this. The fix is in, and now we know we're going to be broke.
Right. Getting back to
money.
Yeah.
So that lady who was going to come out here, well, she couldn't. Why? Because she was in a wheelchair.
Right.
Well, she has the money to get stem cells. And we can do certain things. I don't want to go into the detail what we can or can't do here. But for the most part, if you need big doses, you need to go out of the country. That's scandalous. Let's just use the word scandalous over and over again, Steve Forbes. Steve, you need to call in. We have the answer. Where are you, Steve?
Right. Exactly. Well, getting back to Stanley Druckenmiller, and one of the questions posed by the students at his speech was, how do we change the system? And he said, You have to change the system. Your generation, my generation. We've amassed all this wealth. We seem to be, the train is going in the wrong direction, off the cliff. And so how do we change this politically with new political leaders? Let's talk about the Kennedy clan back in the limelight. Talk about that and some of his messaging that he's been.
So Robert Kennedy Jr.
Correct.
Extremely courageous person. Now, he's fought against this cabal. You know what happened to his uncle, and you know what happened to his father. And now he stepped into the arena. So he's really in a dangerous position. This is not a new system that's been controlling this country. It's been going on for a long time. Now it's reached critical proportions. So if we don't change, it doesn't matter. There won't be anything left. That really goes back to when I was in college. We all had to take that economics course.
Yeah.
No one wanted economics back in my day. But we all took the same course, and it was Samuelson who wrote the book. He was an MIT professor, and the message was guns or butter. And that was the Great New Society, Lyndon Johnson. We had to choose between guns, Vietnam War, or butter for our society as a whole. You had to make a choice. And he said, no, you don't. You don't need to make a choice. You can have all the butter you want and all the guns, and this party will go on forever. And he started Medicare. Good idea. Druckenmiller saying, it's over. Party's over.
Right.
You have to make a choice. Matter of fact, I don't even think you can have guns or butter because we're broke. Because my generation is going to consume all the assets that we accumulated for the entire history of the United States. It's over. Right. I mean, literally over in 10 years.
Right.
We're circling the drain, but it's fixable.
Right.
Change the diet, and when you have an inflammatory condition, use stem cells. They work. They're effective. Yes, we need more research, but don't use that as the slow walk sentence to allow Big Pharma to take it over. And that's exactly what's going to happen.
Right. So fascinating discussion here, Rick. And when do you expect to have your new book out?
New book will be out probably in about 10 weeks, middle of July.
Right.
A lot of controversial things in there, and there's a lot of real bombshells inside that book that we didn't talk about here because I'd like to live to see it published.
Me too.
But we're going to tell the truth, and the truth always prevails.
Right.
And a shout out to Robert Kennedy because that is amazing that he's doing that.
Right.
Because it takes a lot of courage.
Exactly. And then next up after the book, you've told me about something a little.
Well, the movie?
Yes. The movie.
Well, I think it's got a real shot as a docuseries because it's a very complicated subject. Because, like, when I talk to patients, they say, well, you don't understand, Dr. Jacoby. See, I have XYZ-itis, and that doesn't pertain to what you said. Yes, it does. I use this sentence, stem cells don't care what you call your itis because they don't speak English. There's a chemical language they speak. It's inflammatory. And being in other countries, like Panama or Mexico, where they do stem cells, they don't speak Spanish either.
Yeah.
They don't. But they do work. And it's a shame, perhaps a crime, that is not available to everyone before it's too late.
Well, I remember the car ride up to play some polo up in Prescott, the Prescott polo field up there.
Oh yeah, you scored.
I did. I got a chucker.
A chucker, and you didn't get thrown off your horse. I did not get on a horse. I'm a little smarter than you are.
Well, what was so unusual about that car ride up almost 3 years ago is you got a message from a colleague that said, "Oh my gosh, was it the FDA that had just approved a Q code for the use of stem cells?" And you said, I think it's a trap, perhaps. Talk a little bit about that, and we'll close on this.
Well, it's really a confusing issue, but what you're talking about, a Q code is a billing code for Medicare, and they were paying for stem cells 3 years ago. But it was never FDA approved, but it was CMS approved, which is Medicare.
Okay.
So 3 years later to come back, thank God I didn't bill Medicare, but lots of doctors did because it does work. And then Medicare said, well, wait a minute, it's not FDA approved, so we're going to claw all the money back. They never asked did it work, which it did. They just said we shouldn't have paid for it, so we want all the money back, and these doctors are all bankrupt.
Goodness.
Yes.
Goodness. So, well, I thought that was rather insightful. And because now it's 3 years post, it's actually played out as you had predicted on our car ride. You thought it was exciting on the one hand, but on the other hand, like, whoop. You felt
well, you know, that it's interesting on the whole stem cell issue, and I should clarify this for your public here. Stem cells, you have your own stem cells. So basically, when you're born, you have millions of stem cells. And by age 22, you probably have grown into your adult life. And then they start to go down from that point in time to about age 50, you've lost 90% of your stem cells. Now, could you use your own stem cells? That means autologous, meaning your own? Yes. But if you're age 50, you've lost 90%. If you're your age, maybe 92%. And when you get to my age, you know your stem cells by their first name. I have George and Harry as my stem cells. So would I drill a hole in my bone to get stem cells to inject myself? No, because they're not viable. And they're certainly a very small number. And I've had it done 3 times. I had a herniated disc. This is 6 years ago. This is a perfect story. Herniated disc, had a little bit of foot drop on one side. And I couldn't play tennis, couldn't play pickle. I couldn't do anything. And my neurosurgeon, I said, why don't we do stem cells? Because I've been doing this for almost 20 years. Not new. And I said, why don't we do stem cells in my back? Oh, there's not enough research. So I said, okay, I know I need surgery. That's an option. And I did. My MRI showed a horrible herniated disc from an injury. So I went upstairs and I had another doctor in my clinic. I said, I'll mark the spots. I took some stem cells out of the freezer, not my stem cells, and I'll tell you what they were in a second. And you inject them, which he did. His hands were shaking. I calmed him through the procedure. I was back playing tennis in 3 days. That was 6 years ago. That was one shot. Easy to do, very effective. Maybe my response is faster and better than others because I didn't really have sugar involved. That's why I tell my patients, you eat all that sugar, well, the stem cells are going to work, but they're not going to work as well. If you're putting gasoline on the fire, well, fireman's trying to put the foam to put the fire out, kind of at odds. But I didn't eat sugar, so I was back playing tennis in 3 days.
Wow.
So my point is, do they work? Are they safe? Yes. But they're not covered by insurance. Now, I used what's called allogenic tissue. Big word meaning somebody else's. Oh, my heavens, that's dangerous. No, it's not. It's the umbilical cord. I use that as a specific stem cells, which is we call Wharton's jelly. And I looked that up too. Because why is it called Wharton's jelly? It's Dr. Wharton from the 1600s. My question was, what was he fooling around with the umbilical cord for? That's probably another story. 1600s, they knew about it. They didn't know what it did, but that's what I used for the injection. It's safe, it's effective, and it's easy to do. Question becomes for my patients, you're using somebody else's cells. Aren't you going to get an antibody-antigen reaction? No, because the baby technically is a foreign body connected by an umbilical cord to the mother. So that tissue is called immunologically privileged cells, meaning it won't react. So you can use antibodies. So the other issue that comes up is the name of these cells. Well, this is where the research needs to be done. Arnold Kaplan actually put the term mesenchymal stem cells as the term MSCs. I don't think they really are stem cells, the classic definition. I think they're what we call periocytes. What is that word? They're little cells that sit on top of the vessel, blood vessel. Let me give you a metaphorical. This is my understanding. So let's say you have an itis and the tissues, let's use that fire. There's a fire in this room. Firemen are called. They come with the foam, put the fire out. Within that foam, and no one knows exactly how many different growth factors there are. Some people say 1,000. I don't know the number, but there are a lot of them. So the first thing in the foam is probably 10 lawyers to see who's guilty. And then there's carpenters, there's electricians, there's new drywall, there's new floor, there's new paint. They clean out the dead tissue, anti-inflammatory, anti-scarring, and they start to build the new room.
Right.
Now, in our society, we have the guy who owns the house with gasoline, throwing the gasoline on the fire, sugar, while the firemen are trying to put the fire out. That's why a lot of people, this doesn't work. It absolutely works. But you can't put gasoline on a fire and expect it to go out. It's that simple.
Right.
Now, what are these growth factors called? And thank God I'm not in school, because I'm sure that would be a matching test, 500, which one is, doesn't matter. But some of them, I think the basic one I liked, and I learned from Dr. Cook, is VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor. And what does that do? These are little periocytes. The nerve starts to look to see what's damaged. The blood vessel follows that. There's a great video that Dr. Ian White, who's out of London, he shows a perfect example of how they work. So have a rat. This is why I use this term. I said, stem cells don't give a rat's ass what you call your itis. He does an experiment with a rat, injects the rat's tail with exosomes, which are the nano small particles of the stem cells. This gets real technical. And he creates a trauma on the rat's leg and shows in color and radioactive isotopes. And you see these stem cells, quote unquote, swarming around, performs the trauma on the leg. And you can see them. They're going like, so where's the inflammation? Right to the area of inflammation. It's that simple. So you can call them MSCs, mesenchymal stem cells, or you can pronounce it mesenchymal. Periocytes, doesn't matter. They work. It's that simple. So why does the U.S. taxpayer not have access to this when the research in the document, look it up, John McCain, 2003, 62 pages, Senator Brownback, Illinois, he used the word miracle.
Yeah.
How sad. Especially if you're an autistic kid, which I just saw one last week. I was in tears. Kid's 19 years old, born in 2003. Ironic, he read my book, Sugar Crush, and he comes in to tell me about it. He got off of sugar. Now, this kid could just about speak. And his mother was there. I said, did he speak when he was born? No, he didn't. He used sign language. Kid took himself off of sugar because he figured it out himself. His kid's a genius, had an IQ of 135. And he told me when he took the test, when he got the 135, he said he was deathly sick from sugar. Probably 200. Kid's a genius. Beautiful kid. Absolutely beautiful kid. But he's had a horrible life. He's like a prisoner in his own body.
Yeah.
And he goes to this clinic and that clinic and the psychobabble. And now, Johnny, just be nice. And they never tell him that he could have stem cells in that document. We were in tears. That was just Friday. That's sad.
Well, there is an awakening, clearly, an awareness, consciousness about where we are, society, the food that you consume, and you're part of that solution and the awareness and breaking the trends that we've been on, this path that we're just financial path of destruction that
it is.
We're in the middle of right now. And Stanley, genius that he is, that I've been following for decades and brought it to light. You're bringing it to light. I mean, I'm so fascinated by all the names that you recall and the dates and the doctors. And so I'm just so much looking forward to the book because I'm sure you'll have it all in there for us to consume and be able to share with others. so that I personally can help my clients enjoy their wealth they've created, because I'm going to help teach them how to unlock their true health because of you. So thank you very much, Rick, for all that you do, and can't thank you enough. And everybody that has read the book, and I've seen them 6 months later, they've lost weight, they got a big smile, and they say, I've never felt better than I do. Thank you, Dan, for introducing me to Rick's book, Sugar Crush. So thank you, Rick. And, we'll be doing more of these as time goes on. I've really enjoyed our time together today. Is there anything you want to say to kind of wrap things up?
Well, I appreciate you having me on. This is a great story. You accumulated all this wealth.
Yeah.
And you're in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And I see it every day. The country's in a wheelchair. This country is the greatest country in the face of the planet.
Yeah.
And Druckenmiller is saying it's over. Well, our politicians are fighting on the left and right. They're not fighting for us. Dolly Parton's saying it, world on fire, because they're trying to divvy up the money between themselves.
Yeah.
Thank you, Robert Kennedy Jr., for bringing this to our attention.
Very brave.
And thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Well, let's do this again very soon. And can't wait to get back out there in the tennis court, pickleball court this weekend with you. Always have a fantastic time. So until we meet again, be well, take care of yourself.
And hang on to your money.
Hang on to your money.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.